Hey guys, Adam Rose, Vice President, Senior Loan Officer here at Western Ohio Mortgage in Sydney, Ohio. And this is another episode of the Mortgage Guide Podcast. And this week we have Teresa Rose, President, Owner of Western Ohio Mortgage here in Sydney. And we're going to talk about what we're running into, right? So we're going to talk about base documentation that we collect and why we need to collect it, some of the issues we run into when we really review them, right, and dig into it versus what the borrower tells us. So the first thing, we do base documentation, right? Like I've mentioned before on previous podcasts, we ask for certain things, and then depending on your situation, it could be expanded pretty significantly, right? We can get in pretty deep, unfortunately. Yeah. First thing is taxes. So we always ask for taxes, bank statements, pay stubs, IDs. That's your base documentation. So T, on the taxes, what are we running into? What are the common things that are creating issues? What are we verifying using the tax returns? Because, sometimes we'll get that, why do you need my taxes? I don't understand. Mm-hmm. So what are we running into here?
So first, all the listeners need to understand that a mortgage is a 30-year obligation. Some people take them for 15. And even though you may not plan on being in that house for 30 years or taking 30 years to pay it, it is a major debt in your life. It is not a car that you just throw a pay stub at the lender and you're good to go. So there's a lot of investigating that goes on in a mortgage transaction. And the number one reason for that is fraud, because there is a lot of fraud that happens in the mortgage space, whether it's to try to purchase a house for investment when you're actually living in it, or purchasing a house that you say you're going to live in when it's actually investment. So there's a lot that happens. So we have to verify all of it. As far as the taxes are concerned, we're generally looking at those in the cases of self-employed borrowers, or if it is a product that we need to document household income, like USDA, OFA, something like that. The tax return has a lot of information on it. Not only does it tell us maybe you've got rental income, for example, we would need tax returns for that. Not only does it tell us what you told the IRS, it also gives us a detail of expenses if you're self-employed, how many people are in the household, just gives us a good picture of what's going on. And then we're going to verify that with the IRS. So it doesn't stop there. We're going to make sure that what you gave us matches.
Well, that's one of the pieces when I disclose to borrowers, especially in person, is, hey, we're going to go to the IRS to validate that what you give us and what you file actually match, because it wasn't a month ago I had a self-employed borrower, and we were advising where they needed to be last year in order to qualify for a certain amount, and we got the taxes this year, and he didn't write off anything. That's great, right? We got the income that we needed, but when we went to validate it, that wasn't exactly what he filed. Right. So that caused a problem. And it also shows us taxes owed, right?
Right.
I feel like 2023 is the year of no one paying their taxes. Right. I mean, and I get it. There's a lot more going on than just this year. There's past years, income and stuff like that. But it just seems like a common thread or common theme this year. Mm-hmm. Is it just me, or am I crazy? I think we've seen a dozen borrowers that have kind of had this issue pop up on them.
Yeah, I think that in 21 and 22, there were a lot of people that had significant increases in income that kind of caught them off guard.
And if they were for it. They don't pay quarterly.
Correct. And so when they got caught up in that, the thing that you have to understand is if you owe more than $50,000 in tax, which is easy to do if you're self-employed and not paying quarterly, you cannot go online and have a monthly payment arrangement with the IRS. You have to physically contact the IRS and get this in writing. Where it affects us is we can't close your mortgage if you have outstanding tax liability unless there is a payment arrangement, so that we can count that into your debt ratio. If you don't already have that in writing and you owe $50,000, you're not getting it soon. It's probably going to take us longer to get that than we can do in the time frame of your contract. So if you've got taxes, when you file your taxes, the best thing to do if you have a tax liability is send it in with a payment arrangement, which you can do at the time you file.
Yeah, it's at the very, very last. It's like one of the last pages. Right. Whether you file yourself or you file with an accountant or CPA, if you do end up owing taxes, just set it up. Right? They'll take $25 a month. They'll take $50. They'll take $100. Obviously, your CPA or accountant will advise you on what you should set up on how much they'll accept. But we've seen some pretty large tax bills with a very, very low monthly payment.
And rule of thumb is if you have a large tax liability, you're not going to be given more than 72 months to pay it either. So if you calculate that out,
there you go.
I mean, you might see $300-$400 payments. We've seen payments $1,000 and $2,000.
We just had one that had $2,000.
Yeah, it just depends on the situation, but it's very important not to ignore it or neglect it. We are going to find out that the liability is there because we are going to get a copy of your record of account.
Right.
There's just no way to circumvent it.
You can't hide it.
You cannot hide it. So you just need to come forward.
And for
with
record,
it.
when we ask for your tax returns, guys, if you are self-employed, make sure you're bringing your Schedule C in, your Schedule E if you have all the rental incomes and
Schedule F for farm.
And farm income. We've got, not just in partnership, Schedule S, or is it, yeah.
An S, well,
S Corp.
Yeah,
Sorry, what
S Corp. Yep, the 1065 partnership.
Thank you. I could not even say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, partnership filings. Make sure it's all in there, guys. So just a rule of thumb. So if you owe taxes, make sure you set up a payment arrangement, and we can move on past that instead of dealing with a large liability. Next is bank statements. So we always ask for 2 months of bank statements, not just we're validating income or assets. Sorry. Make sure you have the funds for closing. We're validating where it came from. Are there large deposits? Due to anti-money laundering laws, that's a kind of a problem if you're depositing cash. Are there other occupants in the home? You know, what's going on? So from your experience, especially I'm talking about 2023, seeing anything funny, what's the purpose of these bank statements other than what I just expounded upon as validating assets? I mean, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so there's a lot of information in the bank statement, probably as much information in a bank statement as there is on the credit report, because it tells us about other debts that maybe don't show up on the credit report, but they're recurring. It shows us, maybe you have said on your application that you're paying $1,000 a month in rent, but we don't see rent coming out anywhere.
Right.
Then the borrower says, well, I'm paying in cash. But what we do know is if all your pay stubs or all your pay is going auto deposit into your bank account, unless you are withdrawing cash to pay the rent, that would be difficult to do. We are looking for, if it's a product like a USDA where we have to count all household income, if there are odd deposits that are non-payroll, is there another business? Is there another person living in the house? So there's so much information we get from that, and that's why we tell everyone, you can lie to your mom, you can lie to your priest, you can lie to your brother, but don't lie to us because we're going to catch it, and it's going to be at a bad time.
Mm-hmm. So other debts. So that's a good example. So we're not talking utility bills, Verizon bill.
No.
We're not talking about that kind of stuff. We're talking buy here, pay here, errands, rentals. We see people that do this Klarna.
Affirm is a big one.
Well, Affirm usually reports to the credit bureaus, but you got to Affirm, and then you have PayPal Extends. So PayPal Extends, guys. So if you buy something online, and I don't know what the rules are. It might be more than $200, something like that. They say, hey, would you like to extend this over 6 months? Okay, why not? Well, what you don't realize is now you have a line of credit with them. I'm not saying a credit card, but it's technically a credit. And you are making monthly payments. Now, we have to count that in your debt ratios when we find it. Same thing with Klarna. So Klarna is a big thing on shopping in general. I've seen it on Amazon. I've seen it all over the place, right? Kohl's, online. Klarna isn't always an option. So, guys, be careful with that because basically it's just an extend pay. Even your bank offers it. My bank offers it.
Right.
Anytime I spend money on my credit card and I go make a payment, they say, hey, would you like to make this this big $600 expenditure you just had spent over or paid over 6 months. Right. And then for the typical consumer, it's like, okay, yeah, sure. Why not?
The problem with them is it seems harmless at the time.
It seems harmless, but it really can snowball.
I mean, if you're signing up for a debt that's 4 months, there's a good chance we're not going to have to count it against you anyway.
Right.
But we recently had a client that had about $10,000 worth of Affirm and other.
There was like a dozen accounts.
It was very difficult to verify, and that's a pattern that is a red flag for an underwriter that says, listen, it doesn't appear that the borrower's really living within their means. They're using credit to get by every month and using extended pay as an option. So it's a dangerous habit to get into. Just like payday loans. Yeah.
Once you're in, it's very difficult to get out.
Yeah, we're going to see a payday loan on your checking account if you have one. And what happens is people get in them to the extent that just about every bit of their check is going to a payday, which I haven't seen that in a while. I mean, we used to see it a lot. We don't see it as much anymore. But it's a very, very dangerous pattern to get into, and it's best to be avoided unless it's an extreme emergency and you absolutely positively have to tap into cash.
Yeah. All right. So bank statements covered. Guys, 2 full months. Okay, all pages.
All pages, yes.
Bring me the bank statements. No snapshots or screenshots.
Yeah.
All right. No Excel spreadsheets.
Right.
There's so many memes out there. If you follow our Facebook page, you've probably seen a few. Just bring all the pages, please. Even the one that says intentionally left blank.
Right.
All right. Page 505.
Right.
The fifth third is the notorious one for that one.
Yeah.
So anyways, pay stubs. So 1 month pay stubs are all borrowers in the household. We're validating your wages, right? A lot of times we'll talk to borrowers and they're like, yeah, I make, $23 an hour. Great. Fantastic. You work 40 hours a week? Yep. Work 40 hours a week. All right. Here's how much you can buy. Now bring in your pay stubs. How often do you think our pre-approval income matches our underwriting income?
It never matches. So, you go put 3 underwriters in a room with the same set of documentation, and they'd all come off with a different answer, slightly, maybe not vastly. Some would be vastly, because it's a perspective. It's not a science. It's just, it depends on the borrower's type of income. So if you're just salaried, it's pretty easy, right? If you're hourly, that's generally easy as long as you didn't get a raise like just last month, because now we have to figure out, it looks like your earnings are low year to date. Why are they so low? Did you get a raise? Did you have time off work or what? Or is it because you are getting variable income, which is what makes it difficult? So sometimes you get 32 hours and sometimes you get 40, but you're not guaranteed 40, and now maybe it's 35, and we're trying to figure out what is the average
What can we rely on?
Right. And generally speaking, most underwriting guidelines require a 2-year average. Now, you can get around a 2-year average. There are times you can use a 1 year. But if you're talking 6 months on variable income, that makes it really tough. You're going to have to really dig deep to see what the total history is and if it makes any sense at all to do that, or maybe use a nominal amount of the income. When there's overtime and bonus thrown in there, or maybe it's a nurse, and nurses, they have all different types of pay.
Yep.
It makes it really difficult. So when you're talking to your loan officer about how much money you make, you really need to make sure you give them the whole story. Yeah, I make $23 an hour. However, I just got a raise last month, or I only get that if I work nights, because when I work days,
so
I only
shift
get 20.
The thing about shift differential is if you don't have a long history of receiving it, and you're not as your employer for a very long period of time, I usually qualify you off base.
Right.
Shift diff, that's something we want to skip. That's why I was alluding to, hey, client says he makes $23 an hour, he works 40 hours a week, I get the pay stubs, he actually makes $20.50 an hour. He's got the shift differential, he's got bonus in here, he's got overtime in here. I actually had a client give me, it was like $35 an hour, and it said it was his base. That was the money, his average he made with overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And so until we got the pay subs, it really threw a wrench into things.
Right.
So being accurate with this, we're double checking your year-to-date income. If your hours are a little off, we got to figure out what's going on there. Do we have a reason for being off? And so there's so much information in there.
Oh, there's a ton.
And do we have any? We talk about judgments, liens, garnishments, stuff like that, and everybody's like, no, I have none of that. And you get to pay subs, it's like, okay, well, you got a garnishment from 2 years ago that you're still paying on. Hey, you've got child support that's coming out of your payroll that you didn't happen to mention. It's $500 a month. This stuff is important, guys. All right, so pay attention to that. So when you're talking to your loan officer and your lender, make sure you're being as clear as possible. And like I've told people before, I usually qualify them off of just a couple hours short than 40 hours, just to give myself a little cushion. So they probably think I'm crazy when they say, yeah, when they call me, I told them you can go 180, and they're like, I found this house for 188. Can I do it? I always leave a little cushion in there, so just in case we find a house for a little bit more. And then ID. ID's the last piece, okay? Yep. ID sounds very basic. You wouldn't think there would be anything there except for maybe just someone is valid. But there's a lot more than that. There
is. So we're going to verify date of birth, for one.
Yep.
A lot of times when there's identity theft, it's because, they're able to produce a driver's license that maybe is not really their driver's license. And I know people think that that's far-fetched, but it's
not.
Happens.
Actually, I was just talking to someone at a local bank that was showing someone that had a very, very legitimate driver's license that was copied over on one of their clients, and they tried to go to the bank and withdraw cash in another state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's pretty fast.
Yeah, so you've got that. Then, of course, you also have residency. So the residency history is very important because we need to know where you've lived, if you've lived rent-free, because we're going to check, if you say, hey, I lived with mom and dad, but we're going to check court records to make sure, or courthouse records to make sure that that is actually a home that's titled to them, that they own it. And if they're renters, then we're going to go another step further, because we need to know that wherever you say you have lived, you've actually lived. Because what if you rented somewhere and you left, maybe you broke the lease, maybe you owed $3,000-$4,000 in back rent. That is going to go against your credit rating in a mortgage, because your housing is probably your number one indicator of how you are going to perform on the mortgage.
Right.
If you're not paying your housing expense, you're probably not going to pay a house payment. If you're struggling with your housing expense, you're not making your priorities clear that housing is number one, because it's generally, except for people who have $1,100 and $1,200 truck payments, it's generally your biggest payment.
Which isn't uncommon nowadays. If
not.
you've seen the prices of trucks,
yeah.
And in my area, that's pretty common. So also the things that, legal name we're talking about, we got to make sure that how they're signing at closing, how they're signing their application matches their ID when they bring it to the closing table. Remember, when you come to the closing table, you can also use your passport. We have to make sure people that get divorced, they're trying to use maiden names, or people that get married. Did you legally change your name, but your ID doesn't match yet? We got to have marriage certificates, all kinds of stuff, juniors, seniors. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and you think it's just copy the ID, you're done with it. There's a lot of tells that happen just on the ID.
Right.
So, I think we got everything covered there. Guys, that's some basics on what we're looking for in your base documentation. So thanks for stopping by this week, guys. Remember, subscribe on YouTube, check out Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and we'll see you next week.